Patel. I'm a Senior Director of Brand and Agency Partnerships for OUTFRONT Media. We're the largest out-of-home company in the U.S. Carter, tell us a little bit about your role at General Mills and some of the fun brands that you guys represent.
Yeah, I feel like the last presenter hit on a lot of good ones. Yes, we represent and own about 100 brands globally, and so that's a really big number, but obviously some staples that everyone knows and love. 98% of households in the U.S. have one of our products in the cupboard, so household penetration is really incredible, and it's thanks to 150 years of food. My role is, my team globally supports our marketing organization, making sure that they have the best tools, tech, strategies around, ultimately to get the job done for those 100 brands. And so I've been doing that now for about 3 years, came from an e-com and marketing background, so I feel like, yeah, we're in a good spot.
Great. I guess the tools and tech, let's start a little bit there. A lot of AI talk today. How is General Mills incorporating AI into the digital ecosystem around what you're doing with retailers as far as product pages, creative, other optimizations, if you want to touch on that?
I think we've heard a lot about digital shelf content, kind of the low-hanging fruit that we always talk about, and of course we're taking that on. Where I think the magic happens and what we're trying to figure out is what are those kind of individual tasks that we can string together in kind of a more system that we can rely on, right? So instead of just optimizing digital shelf, how do you optimize digital shelf based on the performance and measurement that you're also then measuring and optimizing against? And instead of just looking at the measurement, what if we had executive roll-ups of that and external trends in order to tie back into that? Right, so we're trying to think of how do we tie some of these tasks together into kind of these different processes that can be automated, right? And I think that's the biggest differentiator that we see. I think everyone hearing all about AI, right? And I think that you got to think about it as each one of these companies and each one of these brands will talk about tasks that they can automate. But the magic actually happens when you tie them together and you kind of start to get these automated systems, and that's really what we're trying to push on a little bit.
Right.
We could talk about that for hours, obviously, but I'll go for everyone.
How do you kind of ensure brand consistency, especially with like digital shelf across multiple retailers, specific platforms, or is it different for each retailer? How are you guys going about that?
Well, if anyone's worked on digital shelf, like there's just a massive problem with different rules and guidelines for every retailer, right? And those are pretty binary if you think about it. They're published, everyone knows about them. And so it's a really easy way to really kind of stay consistent to that. And that was actually one of our first use cases years ago. We're just like, hey, a computer can count, how many bullets are here better than anyone, right? And so that's what we did. From like a brand voice standpoint, that was really challenging at first. It was one of the things that really kind of discounted. And I think there's some heritage stuff there too. I mean, we've built Betty Crocker for 80, 50, 60 years, so a long time, right? And so the people who own the Betty Crocker brand and own that tone of voice, it's not easy to say, yes, of course we can kind of mimic that through systems or whatever. But actually, because we have 80 years of content to train on, systems can actually see the evolution of the Betty Crocker brand, you can see the evolution of the tone, the voice that she's really brought to the table, no pun intended, is really able to train these large systems really, really, really well. And so we actually have more problem training these systems on tone and voice for our younger brands, so think Fruit Roll-Up, right? And obviously there's not as rich of a tone and voice compared to Betty Crocker Fruit Roll-Up, but that's a little bit about it. And because we've been around so long, there's a ton of training data.
Yeah. A little bit. Let's pivot a little bit to social and social commerce within the kind of retail ecosystem. Social commerce is obviously becoming a major avenue for consumer engagement and sales. How is General Mills leveraging platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest to engage consumers and drive further conversion?
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that we forget a huge part of our job is actually just on retail search. At the end of the day, that's where we drive all of our traffic. That's where a lot of the work happens. However, when we look at where our consumers are, they're not hanging out on Amazon's app. They're not hanging out on Walmart.com. And so we always have to try to figure out how to bridge that gap, right? And inherently, they don't play very well together for a variety of reasons. And so shoppable partners are super important. Figuring out ways to bring commerce to life on those platforms is really important. So depending on the brand, if you remember, shout out to the GoPuff team, right? Fruit Roll had a massive kind of viral moment, right? For a variety of reasons this last year. And that was amazing because we couldn't keep inventory and we continued to sell through. But the connection between seeing something viral on TikTok and the actual reference to the in-store decision is not a tie from technology. It's a tie from habits, a tie from seeing that repetitively in your feed. And so we can't rely on that all the time. So we're trying to always make that connection. And that's what's been really challenging, but also we get creative.
On data-driven marketing, with consumers demanding more personalized experiences, how is General Mills leveraging first-party data to improve customer engagement, product recommendations, I guess within the retail ecosystem?
So one of the interesting, we still own the number 2 and number 3. Don't quote me on that. Small group. I can set up numbers here. We own big recipe platforms. They're massive, right? So we own BettyCrocker.com and Pillsbury.com, which are really huge recipe platforms. We also still own the Box Tops for Education program. That rings a bell for anyone with small kids. I still remember cutting them out when I was little. And that obviously is a massive kind of influx of first-party data. Now, I think the question for everyone out there is how valuable is that data? I think a few years back it was like, that's our differentiation. That's where we're putting all our funds. The reality of that I think is more mixed, right? Just to be completely honest, of how valuable really is that data. Obviously, it's not a bad thing to have. To have a direct relationship with your consumer, it's a good thing across the board. How differentiated do we feel that is, I think is the question. But here, at the end of the day, when we think about data-driven marketing, we think about like the fundamentals. We are super envious of some of the small startups is how do we optimize more quickly? How do we put more content out there? How do we, diversify our audience in a way that's much more targeted? It's the basics, but doing it in a massive company like General Mills is just more challenging. And so that's really where our not struggles, but our focus is, right? Of like, how do you get a massive team or massive brand like Nature Valley to all of a sudden optimize media, huge, massive media budget every week? Like, how do you move that ship? It's a lot harder than it sounds.
That definitely makes sense. I guess a little bit with some of that personalized messaging and privacy. Google's cookies going away, but they're not going away. What are some of the, I guess, opportunities with being compliant with privacy and some of these like unified IDs and all these different things that you guys are dealing with out there as far as privacy goes?
My boss will say the cookies are never going away, and he still wins the bet. The reality is, I think the stereotypical answer would be that General Mills is incredibly slow and conservative, which is the case in terms of privacy, et cetera. What we've been able to do though is like credit where credit is due is working with cybersecurity or legal team, et cetera. It's like, hey, what are the rules for the road? How do we pave this road, right? To make sure it's not gravel, it's not dirt, but it's paved so that our marketers know exactly where to go. And at the end of the day, the rules aren't crazy. They are there. We do have to comply. We're an international team, so we also have GDPR and all that stuff we have to think about. But once that road's paved and the marketers know what to do, people just play by the rules, which is a lame answer, but it's different than most who are complaining about legal reviews and privacy settings, all this stuff. Yeah, we have all of that, but it's standardized, it's templated, it's just it's just there. And so we can turn up digital experiences so, like our team is boasts, 2 weeks lead time for brand new .coms, which is crazy. But it's because we put all the work in with those teams to ensure that, to your question, that stuff's like locked and loaded and ready to go. And there's no gray area of what you have to do or what you can and can't do. It's just all set up and the systems are good. So again, credit where credit's due is that, we have an awesome privacy team and security team that actually works with us. Yes, it's a pain in the ass, but it's good.
I guess with so many offerings, right, in the digital ecosystem, whether it's retail media, the social media, different CTV sites, how's like training like for your digital team? Like, you always have these vendors come in and do like education sessions? Are you guys doing your own trainings constantly to keep up with the demand of all these?
Well, we have 25 people here in Vegas this week, so there's a statement on that. I think the biggest thing about training is you have to remember there are a lot of people at Mills who have been there for 30 plus years, and that actually is our differentiator. They're experts in their space, they're experts in our product, they're experts in our retailers. I have not been there for that long. And it's just trying to figure out how do you take that differentiator and mix it with what's new. And that's obviously not easy, right? But like I think you have to remember that part of what makes General Mills just a massive powerhouse is because we have leaders who've been there for so long and know this industry better than I will. They know more about it, or whatever the saying is. But here's the point is that adding new ways of thinking for them is not easy. However, I would much rather have that than start from scratch and not have the expertise we have in our building.
Sure. How about a little bit in retail media? Obviously, there's probably 200 retail media networks now. I'm sure you're working with at least the top 10, 20 probably out there.
Sure.
How do you, from a brand perspective, figure out like allocation, right? So these retail media networks are probably asking for large year-over-year investments. They're continually adding more quality off-site inventory to be able to offer that to you, in addition to your merchandising. Are you guys spending more incrementality, or are you pulling from other budgets like traditional TV to help support retail media's asks?
Well, they're running out of inventory, yeah. So they're having to expand. And obviously this is going to be the same spiel that any brand's going to give you. We're a little, not sour on it, but it's just like, if you look at our total media budget, it is fluid between national media and retail media. Like, it is fluid, and there's a bunch of mechanics in there I won't bore you with. Right, but obviously we've spent more on retail media than we have in the past, and that's continued to grow over time. I think the question is what's the right number? How do we balance this idea of keeping our customers, engaged and happy with what appropriate spend looks like? What is the purpose of national media when retail media is getting such an emphasis and growing in such a big way? I think the biggest takeaway from this is the fact that we are no longer able to blindly spend in retail media. The same type of rigor that national media had is now being applied to retail media, which seems obvious, but it wasn't always that way. We still need to spend and support our customers, and ultimately at the end of the day, retail media is a great tool. The question is, how much are we spending? Is it working? And what should we do next? Are questions that we've always asked national media, but we've never asked, or we haven't asked to the depth that retail media probably needs. And I think that's our big focus right now. It's not going up, it's not going down. We're just saying we need to look at it more closely. And obviously that's a little harder, easier said than done when it's such the trend right now, right? And there's so many people knocking our door. We know it's a great opportunity, but to what degree?
I guess to stay on retail media, what are some of the opportunities with retail media you see going forward, and then what are the challenges with retail media?
I think so. The challenge is measurement, right? And we're going to hear that across the board, but national media is hard enough to measure. But if you look at retail media and all the different kind of benchmarks and KPIs we have to try to keep track of, it makes the executive ask of how is retail media working or how is this line item working really, really, really hard. I also think we lean a lot on our agency, so we look at our working dollars kind of flux because of that. And that's fine. We do need extra support, right? I think the opportunity will come in how do we be the best partners to our customers? And I mean that not to say spending more, and this is kind of part of what my team tries to do, is to say, how are we the first call for the new inventory? How are we the first call for these new experiments? How are we the team that isn't just going to sign a big check, but then ask why and potentially be the partners to test the new and the different? Obviously inventory is changing. I think search is probably the next big frontier that's going to shift if we look at kind of what's happening there. But I think it's being those partners, and partner doesn't mean bigger checks.
Yeah, totally. I guess what's the future hold for digital shopping? What are some of the innovations or trends you're seeing shaping kind of digital commerce for CPG companies?
I'm fascinated with search. I know that sounds really lame, but you got to imagine our search budget is absolutely massive. And I say massive not in a dollar amount, but if you think of the ratio for how much we spend on search, but that's where shopping is happening, right? If you think about, you go to Walmart, it's the search bar, right? If you go to Amazon, it's the search bar. And the CEO, I heard a great quote actually today in one of the meetings where Walmart's always has boasted this year at CES about some really cool new things in search, and we're super excited by that, and we hope to be able to partner with them on it. But the reality is that you don't go to Walmart and ask, what's the best setup for my birthday party, right? You just don't. And so the reality is we still are searching by keyword, we're still searching by product, right? And so what does that mean? But then as Google shifting search, by search I mean you look at the search generative experiences, you look at the kind of trend towards long tail search of actually asking questions, right? How are we responding to that, right? And I think that that's going to be a really interesting thing that's going to shift. The way that people interact with sites and their machines and all of that, I think is going to be really different. And even if you look at the new, Apple Intelligence, right? This idea of asking what the best dog food for your aging, friend might be. By friend, I mean dog. That that is going to return an experience that is much different than what we saw last year. And so to make sure Blue Buffalo shows up in that conversation is going to be super important. But we're not quite sure how that works yet. We're having to figure that out really quickly. And that's just one example of, I believe search is changing across the board. Yes, there will always be ways to pay to play, but how do we as General Mills get ahead of that, knowing our budget is so significant in that space, so that we can have that advantage of being organically the best option for the query that's put in? And I think we're doing some cool stuff in that.
And are you guys working with like OpenAI or companies like that to make sure you're staying top of mind in some of these generative AI models when someone is typing in what is the best dog food for?
Here's what I'll say is that we have started to work with some really fun partners in the space, and partners that don't always make us feel the most comfortable. And by comfortable, I mean like these are smaller teams or teams that we wouldn't traditionally partner with. These are not a sales force. These are not, we're partnering with kind of new players in the space we think are doing it really well and differently, and that's really exciting. Nerve-wracking for a lot of our leaders, right? Just because it's not a Adobe, it's not a Salesforce. But we think we put enough chips on the board with startups that are doing this well. Not only can we learn an absolute ton, because if you're just learning, you're way ahead of the game already, in my opinion. But also, I think some of these guys are going to stay, and I think they're going to partner with us, and they're going to evolve to give us what we need. And I think if we as General Mills can get ahead of it and partner with these small startups, we're going to be in a really fun spot. In the worst case scenario, none of them work out, but we'll learn an absolute ton, and that will help us make sure we get ahead in this kind of new world of search, and that has just ripple effects throughout. So,
any other emerging tech that you guys are leaning into that's fun and exciting?
That's a great question. The AI space is getting all the buzz, and so I'm not going to answer AI, even though it's really 95% of my job. What I think is really cool, and the 4 or 5 years I've been at Mills, is the fact that what used to be smaller scale SaaS tools now have the scaling ability to serve us. I'll give you an example. Let's use .com for example. We have massive CMS systems that we pay a lot of money for that are great. But you know what also works? Shopify. We run D2C Shopify across the board. We have 35 Shopify sites that actually are live right now. And that type of lightweight tool where we can move at that type of speed was never seen before, right? Never thought General Mills could run on a tool like Shopify. And obviously they've gotten a lot bigger in the last few years. But I think that's what's really cool to me is we live in a time where the smallest idea and the smallest team, and this isn't going to but can actually serve a customer of our size, and we can have a couple million people use this tool without spinning up massive infrastructure with huge teams. And I think that's actually the foundation of what's really cool being in my space right now is that we can do that. We can work with Shopify. We can work with these startups and think, hey, actually, what if we did this on Pillsbury? What would that look like? And we can actually have that conversation. Not only is it possible, but it's actually very attainable. And I think that's what's super cool. And whether you talk about AI or .com or social or whatever, what underpins that is this accessibility technology that we have now, and it's just getting our organization to get up to speed to do that.
What about things like other immersive experiences? Are you guys doing a lot in augmented reality? When Meta came out with their new glasses, which people are going crazy for, are you guys testing that space, doing anything like 3D, anything fun like that?
So I'll take two sides of the answer. The bottom line is that we will be where our consumers are. So I'd much rather invest in Instagram and TikTok right now than Meta glasses. Doesn't mean we don't think about it, don't look at it, but where are your consumers? They're not there right now. Will they be in the future? Will we be ready? Sure. But I've always been a little skeptical of new and emerging platforms simply because they just don't have the numbers. We're just a complete numbers game. What I will say is that we are oddly, I found this out, really set up for success from a foundational perspective. So I'll give you an example. We actually have 3D renderings of every single one of our packages ever created. That is really cool to think about. And it's actually something that I'm sure when that initial scope was put together was thought twice of. Why do we actually need this? Now it's a massive asset to have tens of thousands of SKUs already 3D mapped perfectly sitting in our DAM. What can we do with that now? And I think that, in the world we live in, we might not know what we're going to do with it yet, but already it's unlocking some really cool opportunities of saying, we don't have to deal with that anymore, right? We actually have that. And it's just a testament to some of the infrastructure that I'm still, uncovering isn't all old, it's not all antiquated. We actually, again, maybe back to the experience perspective, we've been a big company for a long time, and it's not all bad. Like, we have some really cool stuff underground.
What else are you excited about, for 25? What was General Mills, what excites you for the next year for retail or just digital overall, the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, when I look across, I've just been able to walk the floor a little bit. But again, I will say the mix here grocery shop, the mix here, that we see speaking on the stage, it's such a fun mix of big and small, right? We recently signed a really great agreement with a tiny little company, and I'm so proud of the work that we did with that. And again, it goes back to the scale part. It's like, it's no longer the massive companies who are dominating. It's these smaller players who we can work with in a really interesting way. And I'm just super thankful. We have leadership who's totally okay with that, right? Like, I run this department internationally, and the idea that we can work on Haagen-Dazs France and Nature Valley North America all in the same day using technology partners that are as big as Salesforce but as small as a startup that doesn't even have a booth here is really cool. And that allows us to be super nimble, super fast. The second something new comes out, we're all over it. And it allows us to also scale to actually create impact with those innovations. And I think it's just that scale game that's really exciting to me. And that allows us, again, to get after whatever might be new in the next 12 months.
Are you guys testing, someone talked about smart cards earlier. Are you
I
guys
heard
doing,
smart cards.
Yeah, are you guys doing anything in that space?
Well, obviously,
any indications of it?
Instacart's a massive partner of ours. They have the Caper cards, which I think is really cool. I think what you got to remember is our relationship with retailers is really important to us, right? We've had relationships for 100 years, and that's something that we hold really valuable. As they continue to become smarter and have the data that provides better opportunities for media, it's another tick, right, in the retail media side of things. Smart cards, for example, sure, another data layer. Now, how effective are they for the average family? I've yet to see a perfect example of that. That's not to say it's not coming to some degree. But yeah, I think I'll keep it at that. It's just like, I think it's going to be another arrow in the quiver of retail. Is General Mills going to launch a smart card? No. But is a relationship with Walmart going to allow box officer education to come to life on that smart card? 100%. And so it's just like another way of thinking, like, what is General Mills' expertise? What have we honed in over the last 100 years, knowing the consumer better than anyone? And then how do we play in the right spot for that? Is it a smart card? Definitely not. But like I said, the idea that your Pillsbury saved recipes might come to life in that and give you a personalized way around the store to get all the kind of products you need. Yeah, I can see that happening.
Cool. That's all the questions.
Sweet.
Yeah. It was fun, insightful. Any questions from the audience?
So do you have any questions? Oh, anyone ready?
Hi, you talked a little bit about social commerce, and I'm very curious. I work for Tastemade, where we distribute a lot of our content on social, and our brand partners are coming to us asking us to employ shoppable technology, which we are doing across nearly every one of our partnerships. But I'm curious as to your thought around the role of that shoppable commerce in the funnel and how much of that is actually driving conversions, because we know that about 85% of CPG purchases are still happening in a store. So
Yep.
I would love to hear that.
So open a can of worms, we can continue this later. So here's the thing. So when you look across wherever you want, the bus, the aisle, or whatever, I go back to the point of no one is scrolling Walmart, no one is scrolling Amazon as much as they'd like to think that they're putting out content. Everyone is sitting on TikTok or Instagram stories, right? So the idea of capturing people in the moment and driving to commerce is the dream, right? The reality is that we sell through retailers. We don't sell direct. Our price points are low, and therefore the actual conversion rate from the social commerce entity into basket is tiny. I mean, it's so small, right? Sure, you see something similar, your probably is a little better, but like, even in the best content, like think of the fruit rolls, like no one is in the mindset of, oh, you know what, I should buy some fruit roll-ups. Like, it is, how do you affect that Sunday afternoon pickup, right? And how do you affect that kind of mentality? And we were one of the, I will say, my boss laughs at me to this day, we were one of the first brands to attempt native TikTok shopping back when stores were a thing. And we had to hack together a way to go from the actual story pane into a cart, right? And I can go through the anatomy of that. But like, the reality is our consumers are on TikTok and Instagram, and we're in retail. And the connection between the two, there's no good solution right now in the connection between the two. We use Pair, we absolutely love them. They're a great partner, but even with the best technology, like, that's still 1 or 2 clicks, and we just do not see anyone. We are an awareness machine, but we are not good at converting, and that's not on us. I think it's a shopper behavior. Now, to your point, like great content still wins. Like having good content is still a huge benefit. We just don't see a ton of people clicking and saying, "Hey, like let's add this to my cart right away." As much as we like to think that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We tell our partners all the time, like, think about you as a consumer.
Yes.
Like,
No
how
one's-
do you shop?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then apply that to how you're expecting.
Yeah, you open your Target or Walmart app on Sunday at 1 o'clock watching football, and you try to load up everything you think you need, and 95% of that's the exact same email last week. And thankfully, usually Cheerios are in there.
Absolutely.
Any more questions? No?
Let's go to Drew.
I have just a quick question, and this ties back into the.
Hey,
So this ties back into one of the brand innovators sessions that I went to at McCormick, and they were talking about how they're leveraging AI for new flavor profiles. So I'm just wondering, in terms of Mills, how are you using AI for new product innovations, and are you?
yeah, so product innovation is probably, next to marketing, one of our like top kind of adopters of new technology right now. And one of the big things, the way to think about it, I obviously can't talk too specifically about kind of the methodology we use, but like if you think about the mass amount of data that these kind of teams are having to distill into new innovation ideas, so much of that was based on human expertise, right? And I guess I did just harp on that, but the reality is that what if you were able to take social listening data mixed with all of your user kind of interviews, mixed with sales data on past flavors, mixed with all this, and you mix it all up and you're actually able to get succinct trends from that to drive innovation, you'd be unstoppable, right? So what technology is stopping that right now? There's no barrier to that anymore, right? And so if you think about taking all of these data sources that were hard to understand, often different to translate, and disparate, and you slam them all together into a way that you're able to do rapid prototyping with it, like you're absolutely unstoppable. And then the other thing is if you think about validating those ideas, we used to run week-long sessions, that were huge. We can get done often with those week-long sessions in like a day or two, right? Now, do that over and over and over again, you're ultimately just gonna have better results from an innovation perspective, you're able to do more. And so I think that's the best answer for that, is that ultimately our innovation process is going to be completely different and already has changed a lot. And I think you'll just expect to see more of that in the future.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us to Patel. And thank you everyone for